On the night of January 23rd, 1978, inside a dim Woodland Hills living room thick with cigarette haze, Terry Kath lifted a pistol he believed was empty. The warm glow of a single lamp flickered across his face, a face adored by millions, yet slowly collapsing under the weight of fame, exhaustion, and a storm he never learned to control. Moments earlier, he had been laughing, drifting between bravado and a quiet desperation no one in Chicago ever truly saw. He was the guitarist Jimi Hendrix once claimed was better than me, a prodigy wrapped in fire and chaos, a man whose talent glowed brighter than the demons that haunted him. But that night, one careless gesture, one fatal joke, would tear apart everything he built. How does a legend fall this far, this fast? This is the untold truth of Terry Kath. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Terry Kath's beginnings didn't look like the rise of a future rock titan. Born in 1,946 inches, Chicago's northwest side, he first picked up a guitar at age 12, practicing so obsessively that by 15 he was already playing in neighborhood bands. His earliest serious group, the Mystics, earned roughly $50 a night, enough to keep a teenager dreaming, but nowhere near enough to silence the growing tension at home. His father wanted him to pursue a stable job, and by 1963, at 17, Terry had already dropped out of formal music training twice, frustrated by teachers who insisted he follow sheet music instead of instinct. The turning point came in 1965, when he joined Jimmy Ford and the Executives, a local band performing nearly 5 nights a week, sometimes playing 3 45-minute sets per show. It was here he met Walter Paraziter and Danny Serafine, the 2 men who would later form the spine of Chicago with him. But the collaboration ended abruptly. Terry and the others were dismissed when the band shifted direction, a cold decision delivered in a single conversation that lasted less than 5 minutes. It was Terry's first taste of the business side of music, and the realization that talent didn't guarantee loyalty. In 1966, he moved into a loft on Chicago's west side with Paraziter. Rent was $80 a month, and every dollar they earned went to equipment. Terry's first serious guitar, a Fender Telecaster he modified himself, cost him $125, nearly half his savings. But the real catalyst arrived when producer James William Garcio noticed their new experimental brass rock sound during rehearsals in 1967. Garcio, then only 22 but already managing multiple acts, offered them the structure, direction, and ambition they lacked. What Terry didn't know was that this partnership, the one lifting him into the spotlight, was also planting the first cracks that would follow him for the rest of his life. By 1969, Terry Kath was no longer the kid scraping together $50 gigs. He was the volcanic core of a band about to explode internationally. Chicago Transit Authority, their debut album, sold over 500,000 copies within its first year, earning the group a gold certification before Terry turned 24. His guitar solo on 25 or 6-4, recorded in a single 3-minute take at 2 a.m., became a defining moment, a roar of distortion that critics compared to a jet engine cracking open. Yet behind the acclaim, Terry sensed the illusion forming. Success didn't calm his soul. It accelerated the chaos. The band's touring schedule was punishing. In 1970 alone, Chicago performed over 200 shows, often traveling 1,000 miles in a single week. Terry rarely slept more than 4 hours between flights, sound checks, and all-night sessions. The more the crowd screamed, the more he withdrew internally. He joked that he felt wired to an amplifier 24/7, but the exhaustion was real, a physical and mental drain no applause could erase. Then came the first blind spot. While his bandmates saw their manager, James William Garcio, as a stabilizing figure, Terry saw a man tightening control. Garcio insisted on full creative oversight, took a 50% share of the band's profits for years, and even forced them to record at Caribou Ranch, his own studio, where costs were quietly inflated. Terry trusted him, or maybe he simply didn't want another fight. But that trust set the stage for long-term resentment and financial fog that Terry never fully understood. A quiet warning arrived during a session in 1973. After a night of heavy drinking, Terry attempted a take for dialogue, but abruptly stopped mid-performance, staring at his hands as though they belonged to a stranger. The moment lasted only 6 seconds, but the room froze. Engineers whispered that he looked distant, not high, but lost. No one addressed it again, yet it lingered, the kind of silent prophecy that only reveals itself in hindsight. By 1974, the cracks widened. Chicago's albums were selling in the millions, 7 consecutive releases in the top 10, yet Terry felt increasingly trapped. He hated the spotlight, the interviews, the pressure to become a rock god. He once told a friend that fame felt like trying to hold a fire hydrant with bare hands. As the band's brass-driven sound evolved, Terry's guitar was often pushed to the background, creating an emotional disconnect. He was the soul of the group, yet sometimes, in mixes, in photos, in branding, he felt erased. Meanwhile, his coping mechanisms grew harsher. Cocaine became a nightly ritual, sometimes used to stay awake for 36-hour recording marathons. Alcohol followed to bring him down, a brutal cycle that left him oscillating between manic energy and crushing lows. But Terry never admitted weakness. On stage, he burned like a star. Backstage, he dimmed 1 watt at a time. And beneath all of it, a quiet truth spread through his life like a hairline fracture. Every triumph seemed to take something from him: sleep, peace, judgment, or simply the ability to slow down. By 1975, the turbulence inside Terry Kath had become impossible to hide. What had once been a casual party culture hardened into something far more consuming. Bandmates later recalled that during the Caribou Ranch era, cocaine was present at nearly every late-night session, often spread across the control room table in lines neat enough to pass for routine. Some nights, Terry stayed awake for 2 days straight, trying to record guitar parts with hands that trembled from stimulants, then dulled them with whiskey before sunrise. His tolerance grew so high that Danny Serafin once said Terry could do more than anyone else in the room and still walk straight. It sounded like admiration. In truth, it was a warning. The psychological ghosts from his adolescence, the pressure to prove himself, the fear of being replaceable, the sting of being dismissed from earlier bands, began looping back with brutal force. In 1976, as Chicago was preparing for yet another nationwide tour, Terry confessed privately that he felt boxed in, worried that the band's polished, corporate-driven image had turned him into a passenger rather than a creator. Their touring schedule that year spanned over 30 cities in just 9 weeks, leaving him depleted, irritable, and increasingly detached from the polished mega-machine Chicago had become. Then came the reveals, the things the world didn't know until after he was gone. His first marriage had ended violently, collapsing under constant arguments and long stretches of absence. Friends said the fights could last hours, fueled by jealousy, exhaustion, and substances that stripped both sides of control. When his daughter Michelle was born in May 1976, Terry tried to stabilize, but even fatherhood couldn't quiet the storm. His spending became erratic. On touring breaks, he purchased 3 new firearms within 6 months, including a 9mm semi-automatic and a .38 revolver. Road crew members recalled that Terry sometimes wore a pistol on his hip even during rehearsals, a behavior so unsettling that one engineer asked him to leave the control room until he put it away. The self-destruction deepened. In late 1977, while the band was recording early material for what would become Hot Streets, Terry was noticeably thinner. Bandmates estimated he had dropped 15 to 20 pounds in under a year. His clothes began hanging loosely. His once steady hands fumbled with knobs and cables. He joked that he was running on fumes, masking a truth he refused to face. His body was cracking under constant chemical assault. The point of no return approached quietly. On January 23, 1978, after 2 days of light partying, scattered drinking, and trace cocaine use, Terry visited Chicago crew member Don Johnson's home in Woodland Hills. What happened over the next 20 minutes would define the tragedy forever. Terry had brought 2 guns with him, the .38 revolver and the 9mm semi-auto. He spent the evening cleaning them, handling them casually as though they were toys rather than weapons. When he removed the magazine from the 9mm, he believed the gun was empty. The truth: 1 round remained chambered. Around 5 p.m., Johnson urged him to stop, saying, "Terry, be careful with that." Terry laughed, lifted the gun, and replied with the line that would haunt an entire generation of fans. "Don't worry, what do you think I'm gonna do, shoot myself?" Seconds later, he pressed the pistol to his temple and pulled the trigger. The single-chambered bullet fired instantly. Terry collapsed where he stood. He was 31 years old, just 8 days away from his 32nd birthday. The scene was so sudden, so violent, that Johnson thought the gun had malfunctioned. Police later recorded that Terry had trace amounts of cocaine in his system but no alcohol, meaning his decision wasn't drunken recklessness but a catastrophic misjudgment rooted in fatigue, bravado, and months of escalating self-neglect. Chicago learned of his death within hours. Peter Cetera punched a wall. Seraphin broke down crying on the phone. The band's entire identity, built over a decade, 11 albums, and tens of millions of records sold, fractured instantly. RCA executives called it one of the most preventable tragedies in rock history. But perhaps the most haunting detail came later. Terry had told friends repeatedly in the months before his death, "If I don't slow down, this stuff is going to kill me." He wasn't wrong. He simply didn't expect the final blow would come from his own hand, triggered by a single bullet he never meant to fire. In the days following Terry Kath's death, the shockwave moved through Chicago's inner circle like a cold front. His funeral on January 26, 1978, drew more than 200 family members, friends, and musicians, many of them still unable to process that a man so full of sound had vanished in a single, fatal second. What few outside the band knew was that, just weeks earlier, Terry had spoken about taking a break from touring, a rare moment of clarity. He wanted to focus on his daughter Michelle, then 20 months old, and had even discussed recording a stripped-down solo project that would showcase the tone he believed the world had overlooked. It would have been his first independent release in 11 years. In the months after his passing, Chicago struggled to move forward. Their first album without him, Hot Streets 1978, peaked at #2, the group's lowest charting since their debut era, a stark reminder of the void he left behind. Yet Terry's final message, captured indirectly through friends' memories and surviving interviews, lingered like a warning flare. Slow down, or lose everything. His story asks a question that still hangs over rock history. How many legends are destroyed not by fame itself, but by the silent belief that they're invincible? This was Terry Kath's final echo. A brilliant life, a preventable death, and a lesson carved into the core of American music.